this. So the imposter syndrome, really this is going to apply to you if you ever feel a bit like a phony. So do you feel like a phony? Or what's it probably much more of a problem is the fear of being found out, the fear of being a fraud. Someone's going to find you out, someone's going to eventually catch on, and you're going to be exposed as the fraud that you are. That's really what the imposter syndrome really is, what's really going on most of the time in terms of the imposter syndrome. But if you are feeling like a bit of a phony at times, or if you do have that kind of a niggle a lot of the time that, you know, you're really not that good and someone's going to find you out and that you're a fraud, then that is what the imposter syndrome is all about. And you are not alone, because there has been research and studies to estimate that probably at least 70% of the population, of the global population, suffer, or not really suffer, but experience the imposter syndrome at certain times. So it is by no means rare. And that is really important to know, because a lot of the time we feel it inside, and we, because of the nature of the imposter syndrome, which we're going to learn about, because of that, we're going to keep it inside. We're going to hide it up, and, you know, because we're terrified that someone's going to find us out, so we can't possibly let it be known. So bringing it up to the surface and realize, oh my goodness, I'm not alone. In fact, more people than not experience this. So it is a common experience, but the intensity at which it is experienced, the intensity at which the negative effects perhaps affect someone is different. And that can be at different times too. So we're going to look at that in a minute. But so let's just, here, so that's what we're going to talk about, and let's do an introduction. So my name, if you don't know me, is Shane Pearson. And my company is Design Your Life Coaching. So I am, a little bit more about me. So I work for the Institute of Health Sciences, and that's probably why I'm here. But I'm an accredited thought leader in behavioral change. I'm a lecturer and trainer for the Institute of Health Sciences. Some of you may know me from there. I'm the Health and Wellness Coach Trainer. And when we were running the NLP practitioner program, I was the NLP trainer. So I'm a health and wellness coach. I'm a master practitioner of NLP. I'm also I'm a corporate wellness service provider for Irish Life Health. I'm a trained nutritional therapist, and also a certified human potential coaching. And really what I do now is really I use coaching as my main modality, and I weave in some expertise in nutrition and stress and NLP, etc., into that. And imposter syndrome comes up quite a lot in coaching. So I have that experience of working through my own imposter syndrome. I can't say I've been immune to it, but also helping my clients through it. So there's something you meet regularly when you're coaching, and there are ways that we can really work with it and learn new ways to cope with it, or not to cope with it, to manage it better. So let's get a bit clearer on what we're talking about here, looking at some definitions of the imposter syndrome, because one of the things we're going to be learning is you may not really be the imposter you think you are, or you fear you are. So imposter syndrome, also known, I think, was the imposter experience, the imposter phenomenon was when it was originally, what it was originally called. And it was originally kind of detected in studies of high-performing women who had this thing in common of the feeling like they were fraudulent and someone's going to find them out. And now we know a lot more about it. So it's known as an anxiety or self-doubt that results from persistently undervaluing one's competence and active role in achieving success, while falsely attributing one's accomplishments to luck or other external forces. Sorry, I just flicked over there to make sure that I was still live. And then another definition is it's a psychological condition that is characterized by this persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as to fraud. Despite evidence of one's ongoing success, really important to know here is that this is the difference is there is success, there is competence, there is perhaps a lot of evidence to support that you being good or competent or good enough, but that doesn't kind of, that feedback isn't taken in, and we have this distortion inside where we kind of block out the some accurate positive feedback, and it leaves us being feeling like a fraud. Nice diagram here to sum it up, really, because what I want you to the first thing to take home today is that all of this imposter syndrome is happening inside your mind, and it's an assumption. It's based on an assumption, or in NLP we would call it a distortion. So it's a distorted view of reality. And if you look at the assumption we make inside, is like, I know this amount, this little circle here, what I know versus what I think others know. So we forget that in reality, what other people know is kind of similar to what you know. But we are looking outside of ourselves and seeing these very wise people, these very competent people, these very knowledgeable people, comparing ourselves as little small, in comparison that we're very small and we're very less than. Reality is that we're all quite vulnerable. We all have our limits, and we're all good at certain things and less good at certain things, and we all know a certain amount, and we don't know a lot. So remember, it's a distortion, because that will be important going forward as we learn how to coach with it. Now, the next thing is really why is it a problem? Why are you here? What are you looking for? It's probably a problem because imposter syndrome shows up for you in one of these negative feelings or attributes. They call it the big four in imposter syndrome, is perfectionism. Really striving for perfectionism. The downside of perfectionism is it's really, really hard to achieve that. And if you do achieve it, you're probably not even sure you did get there, And, what is perfectionism? Aiming for 100%. A little one-liner here is to tell a perfectionist to settle for excellence. And we'll be looking at that kind of later on, how we can kind of manage some of those aims and goals or comparisons. Another one is fear of failure. Fear of failure is just in us, We can do a lot of work in this, but we don't really like to experience what we deem as failure. So we can use that. We can change perhaps our approach to failure. Look at that later on. But is that how it's showing up for you? What is it? Maybe it's self-doubt. You're doubting yourself. And that, the inner critic we all have really can fuel the inner critic. Anxiety. That constant anxiety is kind of future-based stress. So we're afraid of something that might happen in the future. And that is usually related to being found out, being called out for who you really are, the fraud. You've got away with it somehow up till now. Or maybe it's an inability to enjoy your success. If you're achieving the success and you're putting all this hard work into it, but because you're constantly afraid of being this exposure, being found out, you're not able to enjoy the success, and you're not actually receiving the critical information, that you're not actually receiving the evidence that you are competent, you do know enough, and that you are successful. So that can really take a lot of the fun out of the pursuit of success. Or maybe it's holding you back. What is that? How would you be holding yourself back? Are you holding your breath? I think I'm talking to coaches like myself here, practitioners and therapists, holding yourself back. Perhaps we could be more visible. We could show up more. We could volunteer more, or put more stuff online. Is a huge platform now. So social media. Are we holding ourselves back? What the question mark here is for you. How does imposter syndrome show up for you? If you're on this call, it's probably showing up for you in a certain way. So do drop there and get my mistake. I can see comments here, so do drop it in if you want. How is it showing up for you? Important to be aware of that, because it's going to be different for all of us. And then, okay, so you recognize it's a problem, you're experiencing it, and it's causing you some of these negative effects. Your fear of failure, holding yourself back, you're staying invisible, you're staying small, you don't want to be seen. Or maybe you just are successful and you're steaming ahead. This is one of the things with imposter syndrome. Some incredibly successful people, including Albert Einstein, Maya Angelou. There's a long list of incredibly successful people who, despite incredible global success, still feel like an imposter, still feel the fear of fraud. So when we have this, I call it, it feels like we're dealing with an inner foe. It's like, ooh, this part inside of us that just can get us when we're weak, usually, get us when we're down. And we go, right, I'm going to deal with this. So what do you do? Often when we're not so aware of what we're dealing with, we might just try to go, right, I'm going to get rid of it. It's a typical reaction. For example, if you have a thorn in your foot and it's causing you pain, you want to take it out. So we might try and surgically remove this inner foe, this part of you that represents the imposter syndrome. Or you might judge that aspect of yourself. So I'm framing it now as an aspect of yourself, because really, whatever way it shows up for you, it's an inside job. The answer to this, or the solutions you will find, are ways to work with yourself in a new way. So turning this inner foe into an inner ally is really the theme from now on. We're going to try and find new ways to manage this kind of invisible force that is causing these negative effects. We often judge for example, we become aware of this imposter syndrome and you go, oh, and then we judge them. It's like, just stop. Perhaps it shows up as an inner voice. And the inner voice is like going, oh, you're no good, you're not good enough, and who do you think you are? What about, everybody else is better than you, or we can't compare ourselves, like we can't compare your work to that worker. They know so much more, why on earth would you do this? So we might try and stop that critical voice by judging it. And what you will find is what you resist persists. And when we try and meet an aspect of ourselves that's causing us trouble with that kind of judgment and controlling approach, it usually just creates this inner conflict, which just makes it worse. Or we blame the imposter syndrome. It's because I have imposter syndrome that I didn't do that Facebook Live event, that I didn't put out that material, that I didn't that I didn't say yes to that opportunity I had to promote my work, or didn't get back to that high-profile client, etc. But also, we don't want to take them too seriously. This is really, really important. The inner foe, and in this case, it's probably going to show up in terms of managing as an inner voice, as the inner critic, as how it speaks to you, how it feels, and also, so how it feels, and there's going to be negative emotions, the fear of failure, the stress, anxiety, and then that fuels the thought, and we recognize the thoughts as language. Can we make sense of it? So the meaning of the thoughts are heard, or we make sense of them. So we don't want to take them too seriously. So the really important base point is this inner critic, this fear of being a fraud, and whatever it's telling you. Don't take it too seriously. It's not gospel. It's not like carved into stone like the 10 Commandments. It's a voice. It's like any of us, we all have a voice, and we all deserve a right to speak our truth, but our truth may not be the truth. So don't take it too seriously, and don't believe it. The imposter that you're a fraud. Don't necessarily just hook, line, and sinker believe, oh my goodness, I'm not good enough. We want to just be a little bit more resilient. And with resilience, go, wait a minute, you have a right to put forth and express your opinion, but I have the right to challenge that, and I have the right to find out if it's really true. So that's kind of the approach I would suggest you take when it shows up for you as the inner critic. Now I'm going to lead into kind of a more process. I'm going to break this down and give us more, I call it going under the bonnet, into the unconscious mind where this all is created. The first thing is to challenge this so-called label of being an imposter. So are you really an imposter? Well, let's go back to the evidence. So an imposter, the definition of an imposter is someone who pretends to be someone else in order to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain. Someone who pretends to be someone else in order to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain. So are you really an imposter? Are you really deceiving others deliberately with a kind of a fraudulent gain in mind? Are you deliberately positioning yourself in a way that you truly aren't living? And this is important because sometimes we do, you may have a strong value for authenticity, truth, honesty, trust. And if those are strong, I think are incredible. I think they're very useful values for entrepreneurs and coaches and therapists. And holding to them, sometimes we just need to realign with ourselves and our true selves, and not and the imposter syndrome can serve us to pull us back into who we truly are. We're all so heavily influenced by others out there. We're going to look at that into comparisons. By others, we might try and be more like someone out there who we see as a role model, for example. So is it truly us? But a lot of the time, you're not deliberately positioning yourself in a way that you truly are, that is fraudulent. So a very important step, a very important first piece here is, if you're not doing this deliberately, and you're not deliberately positioning yourself to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain, then don't call yourself an imposter anymore. Simple. You're not an imposter. Look for new language. And the rest of the stuff will work even if it's not an imposter. The rest of the steps coming up here. Now let's go a little bit deeper into this imposter syndrome. I had this kind of diagram up already. It's a useful diagram if you can see it. Is exaggerating others. So what you know, what other people know. And it's not just what you know. It can be like how good you are versus how good other people are. How competent you are versus how competent others are. When you are over-exaggerating other people's lives. And it's so easy to do this. And let us put it into context of the lives we live now. If you're on social media, you bet you, well, I don't know what you do, but most people put their best foot forward, okay? They present the image of their lives as, the stronger, better, more beautiful, more balanced, more whole, more us. So we can interpret these messages from other people's lives, even beyond social media, when we meet others and we meet friends, unless it's a really close friend and you really get to that level of trust and honesty where you're okay to be vulnerable with. We often put forward a strong and best self. Let's call it best self. So we can often interpret that and go exaggerating. I know, because we know our own deepest, darkest secret fears. We know our own vulnerabilities, and we know our own weaknesses oh so well. So we can assume then that others don't have that, especially when we see others who don't have the same vulnerabilities as us. And we can over-exaggerate other people's lives. Now, the problem with this is that the more we elevate others, the more we increase this gap between us and them. And this gap between us and who we think we have to be, the greater that is, that can be very stressful. That can induce this anxiety. It can motivate you to work hard. But the problem with imposter syndrome is, even if you work really hard and set really high standards and get the results, you still don't value it. You still aren't able to believe it. So we want to just be focused on exaggerating. Are you over-exaggerating other people's lives? Check that out. And this is kind of not something for you to be aware of now, something for you to consider, something for you to reflect on, and then ideally something you start to catch yourself doing. You go, there's me exaggerating again how amazing that person is. Remember that everybody will have their own vulnerabilities, their own weaknesses, and they just probably aren't showing them to you. So we can assume that they're there for them as well. So stop over exaggerating. And ideally, we're trying to bring down this elevated others. And so it's more like shoulder to shoulder, because we're all human. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And also remember, you are the best equipped person on the planet to be you. No one else can be you as good as you. So this over exaggeration tends to put this strain and stress on us to be someone else or to be more like someone else. Sometimes we've got to flip that and go, okay, never mind the over exaggeration. Let's bring them down a peg or two, but also realize and remember for yourself, and get some more feedback on how good you are as well, and how some of your strengths. Focusing in coaching, we call it a strengths-based approach. So we focus more on the positive psychology. We focus more on the strengths, and it's very powerful in coaching when you're doing that to a client. They start to recognize and become more aware of their own strengths, their own characteristics, and own them. And that can kind of elevate you. It can elevate the client. So watch out for the exaggeration. Turn that into just, you're going to exaggerate. No, don't exaggerate. Stop exaggerating. And it'll be more close. We'll look at the comparisons soon. But look for more feedback that kind of elevates you rather than the other. So easy to fantasize that everybody else's life is so much better than ours. Now, the next thing is, I think this is really, 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 really key. This is the whole imposter syndrome. Comparisons. If you feel like a fraud, if you feel like a phony, if you feel like you're not good enough, if you feel that your work that you just done is lousy, or that you what the presentation just gave was terrible, get really clear on the following. Because the fact that you're doing all that means you're comparing yourself to something. For any judgment to be made, and if you're saying you're crap or you're better than, or you're worse than, or this is good or this is bad, that's all judgment. So in linguistics, that says to us you're making a judgment. So for any judgment to be viable, we need to know if to be viable or to be accurate, we need to know what is the comparison? Whom are you comparing yourself to? And if it's not a person, it's a standard. So there's 3 questions here that I want you to remember and to start doing for yourself. I think number 1 might be the most important. Number 1 is, whom am I comparing myself to? So find out when this inner critic comes up and presents as imposter syndrome, this fear of being a fraud. Who are you comparing yourself to? Now, it's strange, but a lot of the time, the comparisons we're making about ourselves are comparing yourself to others, or are these ideals, and you're not even consciously aware of. And a lot of those comparisons may have been started when you were a child, or you may have just loosely started to pull on an expert in your field, or a role model in your area. So I think we'll have nutritional therapists listen to this, some nutritional lifestyle coaches, perhaps some health and wellness coaches. So there are role models, there are big names out there, and in the context of the lives we're living now, my newsletter is every day. I get these incredible, global experts popping into my my email, or into my YouTube feed, or into social media. So I get a lot of influence from these incredible experts, global leaders. And it's very easy to start comparing yourself to that and go, oh, I could never be that good. I can't do this. I can't be like that. And so get clear on who you're comparing yourself to, which will be very important for question 3. Now, sometimes the judgment is made, or the comparison is made, not to a person, but to a standard, to perfectionism. So if you can spot yourself, oh, that was a crap. That was a really, I really did a terrible presentation there. What was the standard of judgment? You know, what is the level at which it would be good, excellent, good, kind of pretty good, and then excellent, and then would it be poor? So find out how what is the standard of the judgment. Become really aware of that. A lot of the time, to be honest, it's not there. It's just there is a judgment out there, but it's this kind of ideal. And if you don't hit the ideal, if you don't hit the 100%, if you don't hit the amazing part, then you're a failure. So what we need there is to grade those standards so that you have something to aim for. So you don't have to hit, you know, the bullseye on the dartboard every time. You can still get points for hitting other areas of the board, and that is all useful to keep you motivated as you're trying to get better and better and better. So who are you comparing yourself to? What is the standard of the judgment, to bring some logic and rationale and reality to the comparisons you're making? And then when you're clear on them, you ask yourself, is this a fair and reasonable comparison? So is it fair for you to compare yourself to Dr. Mark Hyman? Is it fair for me to compare myself to, you know, someone like Tony Robbins or Rich Litvin or some master coaches? Or back in my NLP days, you know, I've actually trained with co-founders of NLP, and I trained with master trainers, you know, David Shepard, and it's very easy to fall into the trap of comparing myself to the global experts, especially when I was in the room with them, and I felt I had to live up to this judgment, this standard. But is that fair and reasonable? Not in the early days. You know, we can always, it's great to have these long-term goals. So find out, is it fair and reasonable? Another thing is, a tip there is to put a timeline in. If you really want to be that excellent and to be as good as you can be, fantastic, good as you can be, not as good as they can be, but also put a timeline on it. You know, if you're starting out, you know, how many years it could take. It probably take most, you know, global leaders maybe 10, 20, more like decades to get to where they are, rather than where they didn't happen overnight. So if you're expecting this overnight, or maybe within the space of 6 months or in the space of a year even, to become an excellent in your field, is it fair and reasonable? Probably not. So pare it back. What is fair and reasonable for 3 months, for this year, for 2021, and get these good concrete goals and compare yourself to those consciously created judgments, those consciously created role models, and put some rationale and order to it. And then you can really start to utilize the feedback that comes when you have these consciously created comparisons and go, okay, I didn't get bullseye, but I did hit the board. I did score, you know, so many points, and you start to score yourself. And then you have, for example, if you didn't fail, you didn't hit 100%, but you did hit the 63%. Then you have something to, now you have also another standard to reach. So you can compare yourself to your previous self. Jim Rohn has a great quote. He says, the only person you should compare yourself to is your former self. So when you're measuring your success and comparing yourself to these measurements, you can start to get these really good, accurate, and useful targets. So go for 70% and work until you get 70%. Then aim for 80%. And 80% is I'm talking about percentages as a random term. It could be break down your own comparisons, break down your own standards, and aim for those. And be aware then if you meet them or if you don't meet them. If you do meet them, fantastic. Aim higher if you want. If you don't meet them, find out, you know, try and improve yourself so you meet them the next time. And that brings in this much more coach-like voice, rather than that's trying to get you to the next level, rather than this bully who's trying to terrorize you because out of a fear of being exposed as a fraud. Now, the next thing I would say is to get the challenge right. And what I mean by that is the imposter syndrome doesn't really apply if you're just not trying to grow, not trying to improve yourself. If you're just quite aiming for average or below average, it's usually because you're trying to grow yourself, you're trying to improve yourself, you're trying to even perhaps excel. So what you will learn And if you're working with clients and you're kind of pushing them to make improvements in their life, we all meet resistance as we try and go out of our comfort zone. There's a diagram here that shows our comfort zone, learning zone, panic zone. So think of the comfort zone as a safe place in the middle where we can hang out, and there's not really much stress or anxiety there. But when we're challenging ourselves, we're growing. And if, I'm just guessing that if I'm talking to practitioners, coaches, therapists, you maybe even had a career change, maybe quite recently. And you are definitely in the learning zone, if not the panic zone, quite a lot. So when we come out of our comfort zone, you're going to meet you're going to hit a boundary. The boundary is represented here at the end of the comfort zone, just before the learning zone. Think of that as a boundary. It's a kind of a psychological boundary. And we know, or a better question is to ask you, how do you know you're approaching the boundary of your comfort zone? And how do you know you're no longer in your comfort zone? How do you experience that? Is it stress, anxiety, fear, doubt? It's all our minds are incredibly creative. So there's a ton of ways that we create. It's almost like the border patrol that marshals the boundary. And one aspect of us is determined to keep us in our comfort zone because it's safe and it's familiar and it's just stay there. Don't bother going out. There's another aspect of us that strives to be more, that strives to grow, that strives to learn, that strives for new experience. So it's always trying to go beyond the comfort zone. And the other internal aspect is trying to keep us in the comfort zone. So there is a kind of internal struggle that we all have to just make friends with. But how I represent that resistance as we approach the boundary and as we enter into the growth area outside of our comfort zone, we meet fear, uncertainty, and doubt, affectionately known as the F.U.D. So the imposter syndrome probably shows up for you when you're meeting the F.U.D, the fear. You're somewhere new, or you're in front of a new audience, or you're learning, you're growing, and there's going to be things now that have to change, and you're going to have to go and prove yourself to others. So there is fear. Fear of what? Fear of failure. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of criticism. Fear of judgment. Ooh, so many ways fear can show for us. And we meet that. We also can meet uncertainty because the comfort zone represents this certainty. We know what happens in the comfort zone. It's all certain. It's all cozy. And it's certain. But as we approach the boundaries, it becomes uncertain. Think of the old maps. There be dragons. Beyond the borders of what is known, it's unknown, and unknown equals uncertain, and uncertainty isn't safe. Uncertainty can be exciting, but it isn't necessarily known to be safe. And then so uncertainty often brings up, a lack of certainty equals a lack of safety, and we can feel a bit wobbly and uncertain in ourselves. So we really want to be certain in ourselves, but bringing that certainty into the uncertainty around us. So that's where we grow. We grow when we're in uncertainty. We have to find new ways to operate in uncertainty. And it's stressful, but it also creates the neurological neuroplasticity for us to adapt to new situations. So it is uncomfortable. I tell my clients often when they get it, they go, yeah, I get it. It's becoming comfortable with the discomfort because the learning zone, getting out of your comfort zone, isn't comfortable. It's not comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable. That's why we don't call it the comfort zone. And the reason it's not comfortable is we meet fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Did I prepare enough? Are people listening? Are they turning off? If I go into doubt now, I could come up with a host of reasons to doubt myself. We can doubt ourselves. So the F.U.D, remember the F.U.D, you will meet the F.U.D if you are learning, if you're growing, if you're challenging yourself, if you're going to be more and be the success you know you can be. So It's all about, I think the reframe here is, how do you meet the F.U.D? How do you meet that fear? What strategies do you have to deal with uncertainty and to be in doubt, or to meet that doubt? So rather than hoping it just miraculously won't be there, you're hoping that the Border Patrol will have forgotten about the boundary, and you can just effortlessly climb out of the comfort zone and go into a learning zone or into a panic zone if we aim too high. It's unrealistic. Sorry, it's because, you know, their existence is around keeping you in your comfort zone. So we need to go into our comfort zone, prepare ourselves well, and then go out beyond the boundaries into the other areas of uncertainty where there's fear, uncertainty, and doubt lie, and then gain experience from that and make ourselves a bit stronger, a bit, and adapt to it, a bit more resilient, and then come back into our comfort zone to rest and recover. Now, tying all this in with the imposter syndrome is represented by the red circle here. So we have our comfort zone and the learning zone. So the panic zone represents when we stretch ourselves too far. Now, the weird thing about our minds and how it works is our thoughts influence our feelings. So we can actually physically stay right in our comfort zones, but be projecting ourselves into these very high standards, or these comparing yourself to these people and think, I have to be that good. I have to be that as good as him or as good as her, or I have to be excellent. The very thought of that brings up anxiety and panic, because it's such a big stretch. You have to go all the way out of your comfort zone and go to the nether regions of your own possible potentials before you can come back. So this brings up this, it can really fuel the imposter syndrome. It's like, you're a fraud. Do you think, as you project yourself into being that good, you think you're going to be like Dr. Mark Hyman? Who do you think you are? Or Dr. Chatterjee, or some of these celebrities who are, you know, really good at what they do. It just induces panic rather than challenge. So really, the thing to remember here is you really want to set your goals, set your ambition, set your comparisons, your challenges appropriately. So remember I said back here, is it fair and reasonable? If those comparisons are not fair and reasonable, what you need to do is to pare them back a bit so they are reasonable, so that they're exciting and compelling, that they want to entice you out of your comfort zone. And challenge you and you learn and grow, but not panic you, not cause anxiety, and not cause, you know, all of this fear. And so even if you did go out there and get to success, you wouldn't enjoy it. So bring it back. You want to get the challenge right. You want to know your comfort zone well, and be constant, not constantly, but being in a balance of going into the comfort zone, beyond the comfort zone, not stretching yourself too far. And if you do stretch yourself too far, don't do it for long. You know, the problem with the projection of the mind is we can constantly be projecting ourselves into these, you know, really harsh comparisons. And the comparisons often come then with criticism. I have to mention criticism, because really a lot of this develops in an environment where we may have received harsh criticism, or just criticism over and over and over. And in the absent, with the presence of a lot of criticism, what was absent is a lot of positive feedback. And this is what I was getting at, the standard of the judgment, or who you're comparing yourself to put kind of an order to it, so that you can challenge yourself and go, oh yeah, what did I do really well there? I got 63%. What did I do really well there? Oh, I did this, and this well. And then approach and go, okay, well, how could I do better next time? I go, well, I could improve my, I could prepare better, or I could learn from what I did here and add from my own reflection. And next time I'm going to, say, for example, it was a presentation. Next time you're going to slow down your speaking, and you're going to take more pauses. And then you factor that in, and the next time you aim to do better than your 63%. And your goal is to hit 70%. And you're taking in the positive feedback. And also you should be giving yourself a clap on the back. So we are trying to balance out the criticism. And most of us, I'm afraid, grew up in an environment at school, at home, wherever, where it was constantly marked out, and maybe still does happen, what you got wrong, what you didn't do well, what you didn't do at all. And often you're punished for that. And the punishment often comes in the form of a criticism. So our bodies can be holding a lot of fear and expecting this harsh criticism. And you know what? Guess what? You know where most of that comes from now? Not from outside of you, but from inside of you. We can be our own harshest critics, and we can say things inside our own heads to ourselves that we wouldn't say to our worst enemy. So this is what we're dealing with here. We're going to pare that back and then change that, catch yourselves, change that to focus more on what you did well. More, and when we fuel ourselves, oh yeah, I did this well, I did this well, I did that well, I met this standard, I did good this part. And then after fueling yourself with some positive feedback, which is probably been drastically lacking in most of our lives, we receive that well. Learn to receive. The response to all feedback is thank you. And when we can thank you for that positive feedback, then you say, and one thing I could do better next time. Or what area could I focus on next time to do even better? Compare that to the, oh my God, I'm not perfect. I didn't get it 100% right. I'm a failure. Compare that to the, oh my goodness, Dr. Mark Hyman just did a presentation. I'll never be that good. He's amazing. He knows everything, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, compare yourself to perhaps a peer, or to where you were, 6 months ago, to where you were in your last presentation, your last session, your last performance. And then with an aim to becoming as good as some of these people in the future, what could you do better next time? What did you do really well? What could you do better next time? So you're balancing out the sharp criticism that can come when we don't get it right. We don't get it perfect. We don't meet the incredible high standards that we were setting ourselves without even looking at the comparison you're making. And we balance that with positive feedback. Now you get that right, you start to learn how to set appropriate goals, how to set appropriate comparisons, set appropriate targets to draw you out of your comfort zone. And then you use them as opportunities to go out and learn and to test yourself. You come back into the comfort zone and you go, okay, how did I do? And in a kind of coaching yourself, what did you do well? What could you do better next time? Arming yourself, equipping yourself to rest, recover, and improve yourself so that next time you go out, you do even better. And you're measuring your own success against your former success. Going back to that quote from Jim Rohn, the only person you should compare yourself to is your former self. Okay, so let's do a wrap up. The 4 main things here. And so get really clear on the following. Number 1, challenge the imposter label. So, are you really the imposter? Remember the definition of the imposter, deliberately trying to deceive others for fraudulent gain. If that's not you, steer yourself away from the label. It's not useful. You're not that. Next thing is inner syndrome. The feelings associated with the imposter syndrome come up. Are you exaggerating others and undermining yourself, making yourself small and everyone else bigger? That is just stressful. You're elevating them. Remember, the more you elevate others, the bigger the gap and the more stress and anxiety that brings for you. Third thing then is to use your comparisons wisely. For any judgment, there's a comparison being made. So who are you comparing yourself to? And what is the standards you're comparing yourself to? Are you comparing your performance to it be even better? Separate the behavior from the person. So you're not terrible. It might have been a presentation you're not that proud of, but you're not terrible. It was what you did, your behavior. Use them wisely And then with appropriate comparisons, you can also then learn to challenge yourself appropriately. And by combining appropriate challenges to get you out of your comfort zone, but not stretching you too far, and bringing in the comparison and bringing in the balance of much more positive feedback, a focus on what you did well. And, you know, when that harsh criticism comes in, it has a positive intention, but just ask it and just say, no, I'd much prefer to have some feedback that would be useful to make me do better next time. And that's really what I had in store for you today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up to questions and answers. There's a bit of a time delay, so I'm going to close down the slides. And if anyone has any questions or we can help you, any discussion on this, I was going to check. Let me know. There was a comment there from Helen. I think it was how her inner, the imposter syndrome showed up for her, came up saying, I'm not ready yet. I'm not there yet. I need more information or training before I can do X. So really good point is, are you ready yet? And that is an appropriate question. If you don't feel ready, check that. Because we want to be careful that we're not deceiving yourself. It's a great way to never have to do something is, well, I'm not ready yet. And sometimes we're not ready. So we can chunk down on that and go, okay, so when would I be ready? When will I be ready? How will I know I'm ready to go? You want to get some kind of a structure, some kind of definition on what ready means. And in some ways, you're never going to be ready, but you have to be ready enough, like to get out of the comfort zone. So be careful you don't get caught in this endless, I need more and more and more. I need to be more, learn more, practice, educate myself more. And that can be a very powerful way that Border Patrol can stand at the boundary and just push you back into the comfort zone. But it is a very important thing to pay attention to. So when those things show up for us, pay attention and then kind of bring it kind of like into a court of law. You know, what is the evidence to say I'm not ready? And what is the evidence to say that I am ready? And sometimes we've got to push through, I'm ready enough. And sometimes we go, okay, no, you're right. I'm not ready. I would need to do this, this, and this first. But the coach knows that sometimes you need to give the client a push, and they often surprise themselves at how well they do. Okay, yeah, and this is Martina's saying confidence is part of it for me, or the lack of confidence. Think I need to know more, feel I don't know enough. Yeah. So what builds confidence? The best way to gain your confidence is to, and I think that what I gave is quite kind of useful, is to put yourself in situations where you get a successful result, When you can challenge yourself, test yourself, and get a successful result and bring that back, that is incredibly powerful for your confidence. Now, what can get in the way of that is this lack of positive feedback we talked about, and this really harsh criticism. So be careful of that inner critic doesn't have too much of a kind of an easy ride inside of yourself. And then remember that by testing yourself and appropriately, so not getting out of the comfort zone into the learning zone and coming back to the comfort zone with a stretch and a good result, really, really good for your confidence. But you will never know enough. You're going to have to get used to it. Remember I said, getting comfortable with the discomfort. The dangerous thing about trying to know enough is, and I studied nutritional therapy, I guess started in 2010, 2009. And now, I keep reaching into functional medicine, the different areas, or in coaching, you think you know enough. And then you hit a new layer and you go, oh my God, there's all this stuff I don't know. And then you kind of spend years on that. And then you go a little bit further. Oh my God, it's much bigger than I ever thought possible. It's much bigger than I ever know. So you will never know enough. You're going to have to get okay with that. The need to know more is a danger, because you will never know it all. You just need to, I would change it. You need to trust yourself. A great response to someone who's ever asked you, and I'm do some professional speaking, is, I don't know the answer to that. And that's a really good question. And I would be happy to come back to you with an answer when I find it out. If people ask you a question and the expert says, that's a really good question, I don't know the answer, they usually feel pretty darn good, rather than thinking you're a fraud. So remember that as kind of a metaphor, not just in speaking, but who you're interacting with. It's okay not to know. Give yourself permission not to know might be a good response there. Okay, Joanne says, I always feel I need to learn more or train more, but I'm battling it against it and pushing forward to practicing what I do know now with a view to further training in the future. Beautiful, Joanne. That is just the attitude. That is, again, you're pushing through the discomfort. And you can train more, you can learn more and grow yourself. It's the whole point. And I think if you're in the growth mindset, it's just a reality. You're going to be in this phase. But if you don't test what you know, you don't really know what you know until you've put into practice. The great confidence comes from working with a client, and just stuff starts coming out of you, and you forgot you knew it, and it just became from a prompt or a request from them. So that might help. I just see I'm frozen here on the screen. That seems to be okay now. Let me see, is there any more? Great. Cool. Anything else coming up for you, or in the context of you, imposter syndrome, tips you want to ask me? I really appreciated those prompts. Thank you very much for all of you who have commented. I know some of you are getting this in the recording, so can be made known, or actually I'm in the group now. So put your questions into the Facebook page, even if it isn't the recording, and I will, I'll help out if I can. Yeah. So pushing forward and learning on the job. Yeah. You remember, your first day, and if you think of the first day it's going to school, the first day at work, it's like, oh, all these anxieties and fears, but you learn quickly. You learn very quickly on the job. There's a little bit of neuroplasticity and neuroscience I brought in there. I think is very appropriate here. The comfort zone, we spoke about that. When we're out of our comfort zone, it's stressful. Okay, but there's two kinds of stress. There's eustress and distress. So eustress is positive stress. And positive stress can be really good for us. It's like building resilience. It's putting ourselves in a challenging situation, but you know the reason why. And that's a really important piece here. Meaning and purpose is a great way to know, to make stress positive. So make sure there's a meaning and purpose for the stretch, and then pushing yourself into that comfort zone. Because of that uncomfortable feeling of stress, what that does, it creates more neuroplasticity in the brain. The brain is in this, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with the situation in the future? It's a primal evolutionary aspect of our brain, and it's really, really powerful. And that comes when we're in this stretch. So learning on the job is a very accurate description of that. So again, it goes back to being comfortable with the discomfort. And then when you challenge yourself and go out and get these results and bring those gains home, bring those wins home back into the comfort zone, that's going to build resilience and it's going to make you feel more equipped, more ready to go out, back out of the comfort zone again. Thanks for that, Martina. Okay, I can hang around for a few more minutes if there's any more questions or comments, and if not, we can close this off, and I will check the I'll keep an eye on the comments and help if I can if people listen to the recording. Well, really great to have you on board, and your engagement make a live event really feel live. So I appreciate that. And when I had the slideshow up, it was very hard to see the comments as well. So I'm sorry if I missed anything earlier on. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me at this event. I want to mention actually I have written the stress management course, and IHS have a lot of some really cool courses out there, and they're doing a Black Friday sale. So check that out, and up to, I think, some incredible discounts of 60% and more. And yeah, reach out to me. So designyourlifecoaching.ie is my own website. And if you're interested, if perhaps you have an imposter syndrome, it can be more intense. So working with a coach is a great way to do it. NLP practitioners would be probably good people to go to as well. Just anyone. Actually, another thing is just to have an ally, just being able to be open and vulnerable and talk through your fears with even a close friend, with even a colleague or peers. You're connecting is a great here. So hooking up with a peer, a colleague on the platform here, or from your classes or your groups, and just sharing, your own fears and resistance, and that can, get it out of your head. And when it comes out of our head and we speak about it, it can integrate further and make it seem a little bit more doable or more practical. And it really is important to get the support of others. So you reach out to me if you want, designyourlifecoaching.ie or shane@designyourlifecoaching.ie. And like I say, I'm here on the forum. You can reach out to me private message as well. Okay, well, we're coming up on the hour, and I'm sure you'd be glad to go if you're not already gone. Thank you so much, and I'll close off now, and I hope to see you again on another event soon. Have a great day. Enjoy some bargains on Black Friday.